Hi, I'm James Maguire from the New South Wales Office of Environment and Heritage. Between September and December of 2012, approximately 8,000 megalitres of environmental water was supplied to a long stranded wetland system north of Balranald on the Murrumbidgee River. The environmental water was a mixture of Commonwealth environmental water and New South Wales OEH environmental water.
Originally we were looking at the lake here. We could see it was just a small lake. It did have a fringe of gum around it, so approximately 100 years ago this would have had water.
Hobblers Lake and Penarie Creek had remained dry for over 100 years because of historical levees which held water back in the core North Redbank system. With the aid of Commonwealth biodiversity funding and OEH funding, we were able to breach numerous levees and install large regulators which cater for native fish passage, opening up the historical flow paths from the Redbank forest out to these western lakes. The environmental water was diverted from the Murrumbidgee River at Redbank Weir down the North Redbank Channel and then out into a Narwie redgum forest section, into Yarrawol Creek, through Yarrawol Creek into Paika Creek, across the top of Paika Lake into Cherax Swamp, then out the back of Cherax Swamp into Hobblers Lake and eventually into Penarie Creek.
It took about 4 weeks to fill up the areas out here that we put in recent reserves. We've kept it carp free with a series of carp screens, and the bird life that came in was very large numbers, probably 30 to 40,000 birds of all the duck species. There was a few freckled duck spotted, countless numbers of water hens, black-tailed water hens.
These long-stranded wetlands hadn't received water for over 100 years. In the instance of Penarie Creek, it was littered with hundreds of dead river redgums that had died over 80 years ago since the last water ran down that system. For the second year in a row, we had a fantastic result with the wildlife response from the environmental watering. We had estimates between 20 and 40,000 waterbirds in the whole system from Narwie out to Penarie Creek. And we also had the same 3 threatened species recorded: painted snipe, freckled duck and blue-billed duck. These were among just over 35 different waterbird species that were recorded in the OEH waterbird monitoring. As well as the new regulators, we also funded the construction of an experimental carp screen, which has proved to be highly efficient at excluding large carp from moving out into the systems including Hobblers Lake and Penarie Creek.
We designed a carp screen to keep out the large fish and see if we can get the response out on these new reserves. So we've got Hobblers Lake and Penarie Creek, upper and lower Cherax, 2012 carp free.
Not only do carp have such a negative effect on water quality and aquatic vegetation, but they also affect animals like frogs, eating tadpoles and egg masses, and frogs are a very important part in the food chain in these wetlands, feeding water birds, tortoises, snakes and other fauna. To rehabilitate these long dry wetland systems and re-establish aquatic vegetation, it would be very difficult to do that with large numbers of carp in the wetlands. So the carp screens have been crucial to our success, enabling the revegetation efforts to be successful.
Some of the revegetation that's gone on out here over the last 12 months is planting of Phragmites. That hopefully will create the habitat for the breeding of the birds and frogs.
OEH has been pleased to have the Lower Murray-Darling Catchment Management Authority involved in this project. Both Ron Hoare and Peter Morton have entered into conservation property vegetation plans with the Lower Murray-Darling CMA. These conservation PVPs will mean that the 2 sites will be fenced off, so grazing can be managed to maximise the benefit of the environmental waterings.
The lake area, we've agreed to lock it up for at least 3 years without any stock on it whatsoever, and after that leave it in the dry down stage for a year after it dries up.
The CSIRO are monitoring how these long-stranded, highly degraded wetlands respond to environmental waterings compared with frequently watered sites and non-watered sites. Additionally, Sturt University are monitoring these wetlands and are comparing fish, frogs and water quality with sites that have been watered more recently. New South Wales OEH is also analysing satellite imagery to track where the flows go and how many hectares are inundated. As well as the environmental waterings in the western side of the system, on the eastern side of the system in Narwie, with the aid of the new regulators and rebuilt levee banks, we've been able to divert water to over 1,000 hectares of wetlands which hadn't seen water for up to 20 years. The aquatic vegetation response to the environmental waterings in Narwie has been extremely good, and it's very promising to know there's such a good source of seed bank upstream of these other long-stranded sites. Another aspect of the project which is funded by Biodiversity Fund is the active revegetation of these wetlands with species such as Phragmites, tall spike rush and lignum. OEH is very pleased with the results of the environmental watering and the associated conservation measures. We look forward to working with the same landholders again for the repeat watering in spring 2013.